Well, I think we need to start out by appreciating the fact that we are in the midst of what is really a huge political experiment for the United States. I mean, one reason why we haven't heard much about Kamala Harris's policies is because she's only been a candidate for a short time, right? She didn't go through the primary process and the kind of meat grinder of that. She's having to introduce herself in a way that isn't typical for a nominating convention like this. The policy detail is starting to come. We saw some blowback from the suggestion of going after companies that engage in so-called price gouging. That's going to be very hard to do. Corporate tax matters to the street, probably matters a lot less to Main Street versus Wall Street. But Harris will be coming out with more detail. I think the short time frame, this compressed time frame really plays to her advantage.
So what is she going to do about the other big issue, or one of the other big issues, which is Israel? Obviously, a lot of Democrats want to see Palestinians get a little bit of relief, but President Biden was a strong Zionist. How does she address this, or does she leave it?
There's not a lot of upside for Harris in coming out hard on any foreign policy positions. She has introduced some daylight between her position and President Biden's in a way that seems to have appeased, the so-called hard left of the Democratic Party. One of the big fears, remember, for the DNC this year was that the pro-Gaza protesters were going to be disruptive. There was a lot of ink about, would this be a replay of 1968? That hasn't happened. I think what Harris is doing what she needs to do, which is bring together the factions of the Democratic Party. It's a much bigger tent than Republicans are. And, a pretty unwieldy group. And so bringing out all of these big guns, the Obamas, the Hillary Clinton and others, is helping to accomplish that, and Bernie Sanders and AOC.
And of course, you make the good point that there's not a lot of upside for Harris here when it comes to foreign policy and being very vocal there, but someplace where we are getting details of what her policy platforms might look like is when it comes to economic policy, of course, really making a splash when it came to price gouging. There's been talk about price caps, which have certainly turned a lot of heads over when it comes to the coverage there. What do you make of that? I mean, is that what voters want to hear about at this stage of the game?
Listen, they're having to do message testing live, which again is unusual for just a couple of months ahead of a U.S. election. We saw the campaign and Harris herself walk back the remarks on price gouging, again, very hard to implement. There's been some talk that they might start to say something about crypto, and the crypto community has been pretty aligned with former President Trump. There's a lot of space here, but it won't come until after Labor Day. I think we're looking at that first presidential debate between Harris and Trump on September 10th. Between Labor Day and then is when we'll start to see more detail. But there's not a lot of upside, again, for a candidate to show their hand.
Tina, we thank you so very much.